I got into the construction business, and there's a lot of leftover materials. And I hate to see waste. So you'd play with them a little bit in your mind as you're walking around a construction site, and then they're throwing stuff away. So I started grabbing stuff, and I would find things that are literally called shoulders and T's. I mean, the plumbing stuff is just about form and function. But you look at it and you go, that's pretty cool looking. And then I take it from there. And, On 95, as you're driving north, there was a overpass that was falling apart. And every time I drove by it, I could see the understructure. That was the rebar peeking through the concrete. And I just loved the form which they build to help hold together the concrete. So it has a purpose, but it's hidden. So it's the bones underneath the piece. I became intrigued by the bones. And then I started playing with them and started doing this series, which is mostly, it's out of rebar. The material is about either being in tension or under compression. Everything is either torquing out and can bounce, or it's very static and wrapped around itself and supporting itself. The materials are a jumping off point. That truth to that material, because that's what rebar is all about, is part of what I'm playing with. So I'll have a book full of sketches and I'll flip through them on a Sunday morning or something. And one of them will catch my eye. It's like the right one to be the next one. So then I start sitting in my chair looking off in the distance for long periods of time, and I'm imagining the piece. And then the math starts, like, how am I actually going to build this, okay? As I get older, I use more and more math. I'm constantly looking up formulas and using them, because everything is built in reverse. Usually there'll be some sort of form that I build around which I work. So I'll heat the metal, and I'll bend the metal around the form. In some ways, it's a blending of the materials that I've committed to and the form or the gesture that I'm trying to create, and there's an interaction of that, and sometimes there's a change of material that's in response to the form, but I'm letting the material help guide me on the form instead of letting the form determine where you're going to go. You're kind of having that discussion, so it's form and function again, and that's part of what my work is about. With this particular series, that coiled form was a direct outgrowth of the previous series, which was about bamboo. In Japan, you see bamboo being used for everything. And the minute we arrived in Japan, we saw them, we get in a taxi, and what do we see? We see a high-rise building being built, but the scaffolding is bamboo. And then you see the same bamboo being used for the whisk in a tea ceremony. And it's just so delicate and beautiful. And initially I was really into carving, so that's a reductionist mentality. I started out with wood. I did a lot of wood carving, and then I went to stone, a lot of marble, started adding steel to the stone and making them fit together. Then I kind of got out of stone and went to steel alone. In steel, even though it's additive, I'm usually coming from the other way around. I still think in a reductionist way. Then I worked backwards, and instead of slicing up the bamboo, I was welding on pieces, but letting the Eastern influence come through. Now, I'm from Rhode Island, born and raised in Providence. First 2 years of college, I was at a place called Nassau, which was an alternative school. And I transferred to Connecticut College, and I was doing art, but I wasn't thinking about doing art. I was actually taking religions and philosophy. Somewhere between the middle of my junior year and the start of my senior year, I decided it was really about art. Started traveling, so I was out in California for a while and a couple of other places, but ended up back in Rhode Island because it's really cool here. Now we're in Narragansett because I was tired of renting studio space. When I was a kid, we always spent our summers in Narragansett, and I have just incredibly fond memories. That was the best memories of my father. Are the only time he would, not be intense was at the beach in Narragansett. And we found a place, a lot of land in a 3-car garage, and obviously I've outgrown the garage, but it's, it's time to maybe put the addition on. I oversee large construction projects. That grew out of being a real estate developer, believe it or not, and started doing larger and larger projects that I would never be able to do on my own. And we completed the Peerless building, downtown Providence, and standing outside talking to one of the members of the team, and we're just kind of chatting, and we're going, what's really needed down here? A good liquor store. And 2 weeks later, a license came up for auction. Went to the auction, won the license, started NO. So I like to keep it interesting. My wife says she has never been bored since she's met me, and she would like to be a little bored. We're very much aware of your responsibility in the world, to leave the place a little cleaner, a little prettier, a little healthier. So much of it is doing just the opposite. Everybody doesn't see it that way. And there's usually a joke in every piece. You need to see the humor in things. If it's too serious, then you're too full of yourself, And if you're too full of yourself, then, you're missing the point. A lot of my titles are plays on words, and there are usually at least 2, if not 3 or 4 meanings. This mortal coil refers to life, but it also refers to the fact that rebar often comes in a coil, and that things are held together, by the thinnest of threads, and it's all just an illusion. That rebar that's underneath that bridge is not holding that bridge together because, look, the concrete fell off, and you got to repair it again. And while that's happening, the rebar is rusting and falling apart. So it's only here for that long, and we're only here for that long. And a lot of my work's about the moment, and appreciate that moment. Something beautiful just happened. See that? Cool? Yeah. Catch that? Yeah. And that was, moment to moment.